Welcome to The Fully Lived Life, a podcast for those who are longing to pursue the full life and want to break free from anything that holds them back. Listen in as two friends, a psychologist, Dr. Mary, and a life coach, Gillian, talk about life, love, and purpose through the lens of faith, science, psychology, and life experiences.
Hello, my Shirley Mary, lovely woman friend.
Hello, Gillian. Okay, you're going to have to explain to our listeners and our viewers why you're calling me Shirley.
Okay. So lately you've been acting like kind of an old lady and using the word Shirley all the time. Like, surely we can do this. Surely we can problem solve this. And then you said something like, what was the word you did today?
I said, what was the word?
Anywho,
that's right.
And I'm like, who are you and how old are you all of a sudden?
Well, I thought it was a modern phrase.
It's not. It's kind of like answering the phone and going, hello.
Anywho, the reason I've been saying Shirley a lot is because we started to use this new program for recording our podcast, which is very exciting because we're so like hip and with it. But it's been, as you know, frustrating because it took us a bit of time to set up.
2 hours and 28 minutes.
No, be quiet. That's not true. Maybe it's true. Anyway, so I kept saying, Shirley, because I'm trying to have this growth mindset. Surely we can do this, right?
We can. And you know what? I appreciate that both of us are living out what we speak of because we are embracing this gross mindset. Oh, there's a Freudian slip. Growth mindset.
Yes.
And it is gross at times, believe me.
I hear you.
Growth is gross.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes, it is. Well, I think it's a perfect segue into our topic for this podcast. And it's called Space and Grace. Yep. And I actually say that a fair bit. Give yourself space and grace. Give yourself space and grace. And it kind of really hit home because I was reading the scriptures, and it's Matthew 18, verse 3. And it's a very famous one that people may have heard of about you have to become like a child before you can enter the kingdom of heaven. And I had sort of thought, oh, I have to be innocent like a child. Otherwise, I'm kicked out of God's kingdom. But actually, as I was reading it in the Passion Version, it says this: learn this well. Unless you dramatically change your way of thinking and become teachable like a little child. And then when I clicked on the further description, the word that Jesus uses is Talitha. And it comes from the word wounded lamb. So when he's saying this, he's not just saying a little child, he's actually saying a wounded lamb. And then based on that, that's when you are able to enter in. And that just was like, whoa, because, you know, what are the aspects of the child and also the wounded lamb? And so I thought, based on that verse, sort of three thoughts that emerge from that is that to be able to enter in, we have to, number one, change our way of thinking, because it says, unless you dramatically change your way of thinking. And then the second thing is be teachable like a child. Mm-hmm. But the third, the one that we often miss, is also acknowledge that we are like wounded lambs. We are human, we are broken, and we have struggles. And that's why we need grace.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. So it all got me thinking, like, I know we talk about change our way of thinking. I mean, that's a lot of what we talk about in this podcast, you know, how we have filters, we can draw wrong conclusions. We have an inner critic that can affect the way we think about things, and that we need to change our way of thinking. And that's what we actively talk about. And, you know, it's one thing to have insight, but it's another thing when a situation happens. So just a little while ago, I got triggered, and I realized that my reaction to the situation was based on old conclusions that I'd made as a kid, based on when my mom would get angry at me. And I felt responsible, like somehow it was my responsibility that I made her upset, and therefore it was up to me to soothe her anger. Oh. But so my old response would have been to walk around eggshells, try to somehow make her not angry at me. And I realized as we processed it and I was talking about it with you that that's not the healthy response, that it was the other person's choice to be upset and it's okay.
Yeah.
But I don't have to own that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I remember walking with you through that because I was sharing something that happened between my husband and I.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought him an air fryer for Christmas.
Right.
So now he's frying everything, man. Like if you're not careful, he's going to put you in the air fryer and put you some Parmesan cheese. But he made something and I didn't know he was making it. And I came down to the kitchen and he says, try this.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't like it. And I was like, ugh. And he was prickly and he took offense.
Yeah.
And I said to him, it's okay that I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I love you.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't like this.
Right.
And it's okay if I don't like something. It's not a reflection or rejection of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for trying. Thank you for making it. But I just am not enjoying it.
Right.
And when we talked through it, he could separate himself from the thing that he'd made and not have it be a reflection on him or my feelings towards him. And that's what you and I were processing, right?
Right. Exactly. It's recognizing that his thinking was, you're not liking my food means that you don't like me.
Which
or there's
was not
something
true
that
at
you're
all.
critical about me, the person, as opposed to his food. Yeah. So it was really helpful because you have an ability to see things objectively for me, but also you have such much clearer boundaries than I do as a 2 on the Enneagram. So anyway, change your way of thinking. It's the thing that we talk about all the time. Yep. But the second part, be teachable as a child. So what does that mean? Like when you think about a child, what comes to mind? What are the traits that you see a child who's learning?
Well, you know that I have such a soft spot for little kids. And I mean, my soft spot for 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds is huge because they're constantly pushing themselves.
Yes.
When they fall, they get up. They fall, they get up. They fall, they get up. So I was walking my little grandson, Hudson, the other day. We go out for what we call the big walk around the block. And it was snowing, so he was loving it. And he kept purposely falling. But he was falling forward into the snow, and it was cold. But he kept doing it, and I kept wiping his face, of all the snow, and I could see he was getting red, and it was probably very cold. But he kept doing it because he was enjoying the process so much of falling and then getting back up. It wasn't bothering him, and I'm thinking, as an adult, I would fall once. Yeah. And I would decide that that's too bad. It's too cold. I'll never do that again.
Exactly.
But he was so in the moment of discovery that it wasn't bothering him.
Right.
And I think that's the beauty of a child is they don't know what they don't know. And they're very forgiving of themselves. So when they're trying something, they can continue to try and try, even when they experience frustration and even when they have a temper tantrum. Once they calm down and regulate again, they're able to come right back to it and try again. And that is just such a picture of teachability, persistence, and grace for themselves in the moment.
Right. Yeah. I love what you said about the beauty of discovery. It's this curiosity, this wonder of, oh, wow, this does this when I do that. Yeah. And that I can do better at this particular thing if I do it over and over again, that repetition. When I think about a child learning, I think about their curiosity as well. And the fact that they're so open. They don't have preconceived conceptions about what it is. It's everything is like this new, delightful thing that they're learning.
And I love that they don't have a standard that they're living up to. So, I sent you a little video the other day. I was testing out my Yeti mic and some software stuff. And Hudson was up on the table and he was singing Jingle Bells into the microphone. Yes. He doesn't care how he sounds. Yeah. He doesn't care if he's got the words right. He doesn't care if he repeats it. He doesn't care if he loses his place in the song.
Mhm.
It's just about doing the thing and having fun and delighting grandma in the process.
Exactly.
But what happens, we get to an age where we become self-conscious because
Mhm.
we're pushing ourselves against a standard and we
Mm.
lose the sense of wonder and we
Yes,
say, well, we can't sing.
that's right. And we judge ourselves very critically as well,
Mhm.
right? Like I think about when my kids were little and they used to be in the middle of the store and they'd be singing Jesus Loves Me at the top of their lungs and twirling around. And they just assume everybody's as delighted in them as they are delighted in
Yeah.
themselves. And so it's like, and the other thing too, I appreciate when I think about kids learning is that they're okay to ask for help,
Mhm.
that they actually want you to show them things. They don't pretend like they know it all. They don't have all the defenses up of being prickly because they got caught not knowing something. So I think that is being teachable like a child. If we were to talk about how we're growing as adults, if we can put into mind, I'm sure we all have kids in our lives,
Yeah.
whether it's a neighbor or a niece or nephew or a grandchild or a child, and just think about the early days when they were first starting to learn. And that's what we need to be able to do for our
Can I just
learning.
add something too? I
Yeah.
think I love watching kids interacting with each other,
Mm-hmm.
and they're fascinated with each other.
Mm-hmm.
They're fascinated that somebody else can read a book.
Mm.
They're fascinated that somebody else can do something that they can't do yet.
Yeah.
And they're watching with
Yeah.
sort of fascination and respect. And
Mm.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But, when we become adults and we're comparing,
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at the other person and we're judging ourselves.
Right.
So that I think that's the beauty of childhood is we can look to each other to learn
Mm-hmm.
and to grow rather than to compare.
Right. The other thing about learning is when you look at the science of learning, and we've talked about this before, that good science is biblical because it's based on how
Yeah.
God has created us. Well, there's 4 key things that we need to have to learn well. So we need to have positive, trusting relationships. So we learn with people that we can trust, that are going to be safe for us. We have an emotional connection to the people that we're with as we're learning. We ourselves feel loved and seen. And then we have also physical and emotional safety. So when a child is in an abusive situation, for example, all of their wiring becomes about survival.
Mm.
And so learning, it does become compromised as a result.
Mhm.
So having physical and emotional safety is really key. And then the last thing is a sense of belonging and purpose. Like if we have a sense of belonging, like I am accepted here and I have a purpose to being here, I can learn while I'm here, then that gives us this open ability to learn. So how do you react to that, Gillian, as you think about these 4 qualities of learning for us as adults?
Yeah, for me, the safety piece is massive.
Mm.
It resonates so deeply with me. When I feel safe, I feel that I can mess up.
Mm.
But when I feel judged or
Yes.
held to someone else's standard, I feel very self-critical
Mm.
and I will shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So, the takeaway for me is that not only do I need to learn in a safe environment, but I also need to create safe environments for others to learn.
Right. Yeah, that's really key. So you can see it's all about relationships. It's about the emotional safety. There's so much that, people think about learning like this is a pure cognitive activity
No.
where you're just downloading information like a computer and somehow you're able to regurgitate it. And that's not at all what learning is about. It's experiential, it's relational, it's emotional. All of these pieces is part of how we learn well. So if you think about that, how have we struggled with learning in the past because we haven't had those things.
Yeah.
The other thing about learning is that we learn best when we're actively involved
Yes, I
as
was going to
opposed
say
to
that.
passive. Yes. So people are curious and they themselves are initiating the learning. They're not just sitting there having things downloaded and then they just have to regurgitate it.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm an experiential learner. Like I really learn by doing.
Yeah.
So if I'm in a safe environment and I'm learning by doing and practicing and messing up a little bit, and the other person is full of grace for me and my
Yeah.
goof, that's a great learning environment for me.
Yeah. Actually, when I think back to just before we started this and we spent the 2 hours and 28 minutes trying to get this thing sorted out, is because both of us had grace and space for each other. And I didn't feel judged by you. And I hope you didn't feel judged by
No.
me. And we had lots of laughter we had to have to help us through that. But we just persisted. And 2.5 hours later, we're recording.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
And I was saying to you, we're so mature, it's scary.
Yes.
Because, I frustrate easily with technology. I've told you that before. And it's because in the past, I felt stupid about it, or I
Right.
felt a bit of shame about it, like I should know this already. But when there's an environment where you can be saying, I think this may be an issue, or I'm going to try this, or whatever, and it's reciprocal and you feel safe to do it, even though it's taking a long time,
Right.
because neither one of us could figure out what the issue was.
Yes.
We were both gracious with each other, and we both took time out. We went to the washroom, we got another cup of water, whatever it needed to be. We took breaks from the stress of it.
You're right.
But we also gave each other and ourselves permission to not feel that shame and stupidity that I would normally feel.
Right. Exactly. Because how would we know something that we've never done before? Like, why is it that we would expect ourselves to be expert on something that is so foreign to us?
I think of it often like when you go to a foreign country and you don't know the culture, you don't know the social mores, you don't know this or that. And you kind of you're given grace because you're the tourist and you don't know.
Right.
And if we could kind of go into our learning environments like that, like I'm a tourist in a foreign land and I don't know what I don't know. Wow, it would give us so much permission, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. The other thing about learning is that it's an absolute reality that we actually need to be stretched outside of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Like we actually need to learn. We start with the simple, but we have to keep building to the more and more complex.
Yeah.
Otherwise, our learning stops. Right. And so that's when we always just kind of try to find that comfort zone and not move out of it, then we've actually stopped growing. And unfortunately, because life keeps moving forward, we're actually ultimately moving backwards and we're not growing. The other thing, too, is we need to be open to self-assessing because we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know that we don't know.
Exactly.
So I need to be open to feedback, especially with somebody who's further ahead on the road than I am, to be able to kind of go, oh, actually, you need to push this button or you need to do it this way. And so those are all aspects that are really important parts of learning. So why do we have such unrealistic expectations of ourselves? Why are we so afraid to try something new if we can't be perfect from the get-go? Like, why do we think if we just read a how-to book, somehow we're going to have it downloaded and we're going to be perfect without making mistakes? Like, what is it about learning that we have so much negative responses to?
I don't know. I mean, for me, I think of it because of my my need for control. Like I feel like if I don't know something, then I don't have control. I feel vulnerable. And of course, that's, a huge issue for me is feeling vulnerable. What about you? Like when you're learning something new and you're not feeling like you're getting it, like what comes up for you in terms of defense mechanisms?
Well, I think about two conclusions I had as a kid. My mom was, in her desire to help me be better, she was pretty critical. Like she would pick at things and she would correct the way I'm doing things. And I felt judged and shamed as a result. I know she didn't intend it, but that's how I felt. But the second thing is I did do well in school and I got a lot of affirmation for being smart, for being the one who could, do well in schoolwork. So it felt to me like I did I had to keep being the smartest and do the best because I didn't want to disappoint people. It became part of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine then it would make it difficult for me to try things that I'm not good at because it's going to make me feel stupid.
Yeah.
Right. So those are two of the things that I think affected why. And so like now as an adult, I mean, I talk about teachability, but I still have to overcome those old tapes that start playing when I feel like I've messed up.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
me
not
too. I
easy.
mean, I really have to fight those feelings of almost like helplessness
Mhm.
when I'm learning something new, and I may not be tracking, or I may not be getting it, and
Right.
um, and so I really have to be careful that I'm not falling into that pit where then
Mhm.
I'm kind of like putting up all the defense mechanisms and getting frustrated or getting angry,
Right.
because I'm not angry with the person, I'm angry with myself,
Mhm.
because I'm not getting it fast enough. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, where does that all come from? It comes, obviously it comes from growing up and our childhood and some of the experiences we've had. But as an adult, it certainly creates barriers for us, which if we
Mhm.
can identify them, and sometimes I'll say to myself, you know what? I don't know what I don't know. And
Mhm.
even today as we were even today as we were wrestling through this thing, I'm like, Lord, thank you for showing us what we're good at and what we're not good at. And we kind of chuckled about it,
Right.
but it was true. I mean,
Mhm.
I would rather be spending my time doing something I enjoy and I'm good at than
Mhm.
learning something new. But at the
Right.
same time, hey, we can do these things.
Yes. And it feels good actually because here we are recording and it's working,
Yeah.
hopefully. We'll see if it works. And it feels good that we've accomplished something
And we
today
persevered.
and we persevered. I think that's the important thing.
Yeah.
And we didn't give up. So, like the last point about acknowledging that we are wounded, like even just talking about how we struggle with learning because we have been wounded in the past. We've had negative experiences in the learning.
Yeah.
So we started off being this curious, delighted in everything. We'll stick everything up our nose, in our ear, and into other orifices because that's all part of the discovery. And we got our hands slapped, or we got criticized, or whatever the experience was where we felt shamed
Yeah.
for not knowing or doing things wrong. So the idea that we are to come to Jesus, we are to come to God in our woundedness, in our humanity. Oh my gosh, that just,
And
it
it
just
it
opens up
true
my
it
heart.
truly is the safe
Yeah.
place. And I know that for many of us,
Mm,
our view of God as punitive
yeah.
may not feel safe because of the messages that we've had growing up and some of the interpretations that we've had growing up.
Hmm.
For me, it is one of the safest places for me,
Hmm.
is to come broken like a
Hmm.
wounded lamb,
Hmm.
and to come with my hurts and my injuries and my pain, and know that I can take all that to Jesus.
Right.
And there isn't any judgment. There is, in my eyes, there could be punishment, but it's
Hmm.
not. It's through a filter. It's not through His love.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking as you read through the Old Testament stories that, we see God in the Old Testament as a harsh and punitive God. But really, when you read through the stories, how many times? So even when Adam and Eve ate of the apple, God said, if you eat of this apple, you will die. But yet, he didn't actually have them die. And then when Cain and Abel, when Cain murdered his brother, that should be capital punishment. What did God do? Yes, he did make him have to go out and wander, but he protected him. He didn't allow anybody to attack him. Like there's grace upon grace upon grace, even with the worst of the things that we can do to each other. And so I think if we can acknowledge our woundedness
Mhm.
and our humanity, then we don't have to be so defensive and defended and self-protective and closed and proud. Like, I can do this on my own.
Yeah.
I don't need help. Like we can actually ask for help. We can be vulnerable in our needs. I mean, as a two, you hate being vulnerable. I hate being needy or
Yeah.
perceived as being needy. So I'd rather be focused on other people's needs and not at all even admit to myself
Mhm.
that I have needs. And that's pride, but it's also part of my sense of self-worth. So if I can recognize that I have needs, that I am needy, that I ought not to be self-sufficient, that I do need to reach out for help, then wow, like how is that going to help me in my growth and in my accepting of grace and space and love from God and from others, right?
Yeah.
But if you can't acknowledge your humanity, then it's all on you. Like you have to keep your guard up like 24/7.
Which is so exhausting
Exactly.
and defeating.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think one of the things for me is that when I feel like those feelings cropping up, like I'm feeling vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
I have to actually say to myself, what's going on, Gillian?
Right.
Like, okay, you're feeling like you can't get this or do this. And sometimes it's just a matter of saying, you know what? I'm not understanding the way you're saying this, or could you say it another way or show me again? Because I'm not really tracking.
Right.
And just be open to saying, you know what, I'm not really getting it. Like, I'm not really tracking with you. Can you show me again? Because I often find that sometimes when we're teaching someone, because we know what we know, we go so fast.
Right.
And when we look at little children, back to that analogy,
Yes.
we break things down. You don't teach a child to get dressed by themselves in one day. It starts with frustration of getting the mittens on and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes me, 20 minutes to get my grandson to a snowsuit. It's exhausting, but he doesn't know how to do it yet.
Right.
He'll get there,
Yeah.
but not right now.
And he needs help.
He does
We
need help. And me getting frustrated is not going to help him.
Right. We need help.
Yeah.
And part of our feelings of loneliness or isolation, or as you know, my big lie, I'm on my own, is because I can't acknowledge my needs and my woundedness. And I don't therefore reach out for help because I have to present this aura like I have it all together. And frankly, that's exhausting. It's not helpful at all. Yeah. I think about there's teaching in some religious circles that emotions are a weakness and you just need to suck it up, buttercup. Like how often is that said? But we see in God's words, like if we're to go to him as wounded lambs, that acknowledges our neediness, our vulnerability, and our emotions. But that is how we enter his kingdom. And I don't now interpret that to mean that if we don't be like kids and be teachable and all that, therefore he kicks us out. But we don't actually get to experience the fullness of his kingdom, which is the grace and the love and the help that he gives us.
Yeah.
Like if we're always trying to do things on our own and we're defending ourselves, we don't rely on him. We don't turn to him. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you be some of your tips for us when we think through this?
Right. Yeah. So before I kind of lay out the tips, I think that when we look at what God is offering us in his love and his grace and compassion, that he actually wants us to accept his love. And that when we don't acknowledge our neediness, we actually miss out. And remember what I said, what are our basic needs? Positive, trusting relationships, attachment, emotional connection, physical and emotional safety, a sense of belonging and purpose. That's how we're wired. So if we can acknowledge that, then we can reach out to him for the support and the love and the grace that we need. And we can give ourselves grace and space. So some of the tips I would offer to our listeners and viewers is think back to your best learning experiences and just kind of think what memories come to mind when you think about that. And then think about your worst learning experiences and what was the difference, right? So I think that's something. When I read off that list of our basic needs, the positive, trusting relationships, attachment and emotional connection, physical and emotional safety, and a sense of belonging and purpose, what would you say is your greatest need right now? Right? You acknowledge that for you, it was that sense of safety. Well, what is it for you as you're listening in and watching, right? And where have you been too hard on yourself? And you need to give yourself grace, space and grace, right? And we've done podcasts on the inner critic. I mean, if you need to re-listen to those ones, they're helpful, especially as you look at sort of the Enneagram and the numbers and how they struggle with the inner critic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good stuff. Yeah. And for me, I would, from life coaching perspective, I would ask people to look at this foreign territory. Because we've all been in that situation where we've been in a completely foreign environment to us. And it seems to be like a time of discovery and adventure and learning. And we've got the guidebooks and we've done some research. And so I would think of, what is the thing that you want to learn? What is in 2022, what do you want to learn? And look at it as if it's a foreign thing altogether for you.
Right.
So where would you go? You would go find some research. You'd go talk to people who'd been there. You would go and do some, Googling on the internet and find some tips and tricks. You'd start there rather than be at a place where you're judging yourself.
Right.
So if we can start from kind of ground zero and say, I'm entering this new territory. I don't know what I don't know. I'm going to give myself the grace and the space to learn more before I venture out.
Right.
And who are going to be some of my guides along the way in this 2022?
Yeah. Especially for people who love to travel. I think that'll really resonate with them.
Yeah.
The last thing I would say is to spend some time journaling this. I think that would be important. And if you're a person of faith, to spend time in prayer, to think about some of your woundedness, this back to the wounded lamb thing, like some of your woundedness. And out of that place of brokenness, what are some of your defense mechanisms that you have that's maybe preventing you from healing or receiving grace or moving forward?
Yeah. Very good point.
Yeah. And then if you find that that's too difficult or there's just too much woundedness, then I would, as always, encourage our viewers and listeners to do it with a therapist or a coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that, space and grace, that's the theme for this year, especially with all that's going on.
Oh, yeah. It just feels like two words that are so necessary in our vocabulary right now, and to remind ourselves, give myself and each other the space and grace we need. We are pressed in on all sides right now.
Yes.
And it feels like we need it even more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Good stuff, Mary. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for listening in. All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fully Lived Life podcast. We hope you found it encouraging and helpful. Be sure to follow or subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. And if you enjoyed our show, please help spread the word by sharing with your friends and family and posting on your social media. Thanks for listening, and tune in to our next episode.